Hey, how's it going? Welcome back. Done a lot of videos, well, a few, about tyrants, burning the tyrants, especially when they want to call us terrorists. I say us loosely because there's a certain group that I know is being targeted, and I've never identified with that group in particular, the one that's being called terrorists right now. And while I've never identified with them directly, as of lately, I seem to find much commonality with them in particular. While I might not be particularly targeted, I'm assuming that because I identify with the certain values that they are targeting. I wonder how long it was going to take me to realize that. Oh well. So anyway, after YouTube gets done with its bullshit, I was thinking about, since I did a few on terrorists against tyrants, burning down the evil, corrupt, tyrannical, oppressive, predatory systems that victimize a lot of people. In fact, there isn't a system out there in which someone could, in one aspect or another, find themselves a victim of, or a victim to. Even helpful systems, like, we'll just say the child support system. Someone on the receiving end of the child support system might say, oh, it's a necessary thing, that's great. But someone who is expected to contribute to that very system might feel they are a victim of excessive regulation, and maybe that they're asking too much of that person. And then if they are, it becomes oppressive. And regardless of whether it's necessary, if it's inhibitive of conducive day-to-day life, cohesiveness, if it just doesn't work within your realm of existence, maybe they're asking for too high of a percentage and you just can't afford it. But now you're required, because of this standard that was established by a cookie cutter box that you're supposed to fit into along with everyone else, that because they've established this box, they expect you to be able to fit into it with no consideration for your individuality or your individual case. They would say, oh, well, that's why they have a caseworker assigned. But when the caseworker says that her hands are tied by the laws, then what the fuck good is a caseworker for then? If they can't customize your case on an individual case-by-case basis. That's what they're there for. But their hands are supposedly tied by the laws. They have no ability. So therein is the catch-22, and the more you dig into government, the more you will find the catch-22s. That's all the government is a catch-22. I've been doing a lot of videos on tearing down the tyrannical systems, and it just so happens that terrorists against tyrants just happen to kind of have a certain ring to it that I liked. After waking this morning, I had a thought about awakening and awakened individuals. The trauma that is sort of inherent in a lot of the initial process of awakening. When someone is on an awakening journey, they'll usually find that they're healing from something, some sort of trauma in their life. Whether it all of a sudden occurred to them that their childhood wasn't exactly the, what do they call that? something in rainbows, sunshine and rainbows, that it always was maybe that their parents had attempted to tell them that it was, that their upbringing was just as normal as someone else's, and maybe they're discovering that it wasn't, that it was far from normal, that it was actually kind of fucked up, and that they're now healing from that. And they might even find that they have to distance themselves from those particular individuals. But what about the people who maybe never experienced that same kind of trauma? What if they were basically protected from it? Maybe they only experienced a narcissistic parent. Maybe their lives were so milquetoast that they became NPCs. And is that what actually makes an NPC? The lack of trauma, to where an NPC would really not have much of a hope of waking up. And maybe that was the idea all along for those NPCs, is that they signed on to this life path at this time to come through the same stuff we are, only they prefer to be the ignorant of what is actually going on. They just want to live a fluffy, blissful, ignorant existence during this time. They don't want none of the drama, none of the oppression, none of the tyrannical. They don't want to feel any of the real rawness of this time. So they elected to become NPCs. Doesn't mean that they don't have a soul. Just means that their vessel doesn't have access to it. Their soul goes on in the background, learning from an entire lifetime of a vessel that isn't exactly participating in the driver's seat or aware of their place in the car. Would it be possible to wake up an NPC without trauma? You can't just go up to a person and say, hey, this is going on. Here's what I believe. How can you not believe this? And maybe their programming is so innocent that they just couldn't comprehend things could be that bad. They have such a faith in the natural order as they've been shown it, because they haven't been shown any trauma to break them from the natural order that's been sold to them. You can say, oh, Soylent Green, the government does, this, that, and that, and it's people in the Soylent Green and all that. But someone who just could not fathom that even being possible, or that why would the government do that, but then crack a Coca-Cola and munch down a bag of Doritos, maybe even follow it up with some candy with Red 40 and all the artificial chemicals and stuff, wholeheartedly believing that those systems would never do that to them, that it'd just be absolutely impossible. Why would they? There'd be no incentive, along those lines. And not realizing that, the incentive is in the ignorant masses, and keeping them ignorant, and the stuff that can be done in the background without their knowledge makes them easily manipulated and far more valuable to the established order when they can be manipulated. So the NPCs are ideal for the governments and the tyrants. to ever hope to wake them up would be to would it take exposing them to some sort of a trauma? Would they need to see their own government show its actual self? Would they need to see the wizard, the man behind the curtain, in order to start believing? And then how far would they go? I remember a certain time when someone told me that giants, we're talking about giants, and I'm like, giants? What kind of tabloids have you been reading? And not even realizing that in my own Bible, but even though I never believed what was going on in that story, but there were giants. The religion that I was supposed to be believing fully acknowledged giants. But yet, to hear it spoken from someone on my level, it sounded so out of left field. Just, dude, you must be like on something to believe that crazy shit. Would it be that some of the methods are the early stage trauma, like the stuff that happens to you automatically at the hospital, like after you're born, the spank or the heel prick, or the circumcision, those kind of early traumas, or just the trauma of birth, the trauma in your first year of life, all the crying that you go through, all that stuff? Is that the precursor for later stage trauma to then finally come in and awaken you? Or is it that that stuff doesn't count? And there are people out there who said they won't trust other channels or like awakened individuals unless that person has been through the depths of hell, they said. And it's like understandable, because you don't just want someone who's pretending to be channeling these things and then believe them, and you want someone who's been really fucked up and come back from that and healed, and then like it's authentic. This person is healed from something, and here they are, because that inside you've healed from something. And so does that mean that to someone that may not have had the sexual assault early on, or the other things, the traumatic childhoods, the abuse, or physical or mental, whatever it is, and then later on they end up like experiencing a tragic loss of a loved one, or a breakup, or something that just really sends them over the edge. Maybe it was even like an unalive attempt on themselves or something. Even people that have survived that don't end up waking up necessarily, but they're that much closer to it. They acknowledge, holy shit, the world is not what it seems, or what it always seemed. Is that trauma somehow then later on in life, is that related to the loss of something? Because that's like our biggest trauma, right? Like the fear of abandonment, or the fear of like being absolutely and utterly alone. Is it that if you didn't experience it early on, that then when you experience it later, it becomes that much more traumatic? Or is it that like the feelings of utter abandonment are what, when you when you feel that and you learn to self-soothe, and you learn that, oh, it's not actually other people that are necessary to make me feel a certain way. When you realize that separation from others emotionally, but simultaneously you're realizing the connection of unity that you have with source consciousness, and that is the awakening. But the initial separation of, I don't need, these things don't define me, these people don't define me, these, material things, the ego, my thoughts, they don't define me. I am not my body. I am not these things. Realizing that is part of awakening. So the first steps of that are separating yourself from the materialistic or the outside world. It's, I think early on, depending on how NPC you are or not, you form attachments to things. And then as you go through life, those attachments find a way of breaking off naturally. And as they break off, you find a way of healing and coping, or finding a replacement. Like some people that choose not to wake up after tragic losses are the ones who go and replace it with something right away, and don't actually sit there with that loss and then learn ways to soothe and, comfort their own emotions to overcome that feeling of loss and reach a state of wholeness again within themselves. That they would still seek to find that wholeness from outside of themselves. And I mean, just that alone is a lot of what people don't even realize. And what keeps a lot of people so far away from awakening is that they're constantly looking outside of themselves for something that's going to fill that void, and not realizing that they are the only thing that can fill that void. Or they will keep on searching for it for their entire lives. And that is the ignorance of being unawakened. That's the NPC, is that they believe that their feelings are outside of themselves, that it's what happens outside of them, what happens to them, are where their feelings come from. That they're not responsible for the flavor of the feelings, that the flavor comes from outside of them. They don't take responsibility for, no, you made yourself feel that way based off of that person's contribution. And in that, it's sort of a deferral of authority from your own sovereignty, your own ability to take responsibility for the way you feel, and to attribute that state of being to something that's outside of yourself is to give away your sovereignty. and to seek the authority of other things. If it comes down to a decision that you make, yes or no, do you feel like you would want more sugar in your diet? Do you desire to have more sugar in your diet? Yes. Do you go and argue for the sugar in your diet? Do you say, I want more sugar, I feel this is my desire, and here I stand expecting it to happen? That's sovereignty. That's outright saying, I expect this to happen based on how I feel. That's it. That's the only authority you need. But the minute you go in and bring in the periodic, not the periodic, the pyramid, the food pyramid, and you start quoting the food pyramid and nutritionists, and they say, oh, well, this person says, the food pyramid says that we should have at least this much sugar in our diets. Well, now you're deferring your authority, your sovereignty, you're deriving it from an outside authority, from the food pyramid, not from your own feelings. You feel you want more sugar. You're using the food pyramid to tell you that it's okay to have more sugar. You're not deriving that from within yourself. That's my example on that. So seeking outside of yourself is to defer that authority from outside of yourself and sacrifice your own sovereignty in the process. Too often we do that. I think we're basically programmed to do that. Like even the speed limit. You're driving down the road. You're like, I think I'd like to go faster than this. So you go faster. But then you see the speed limit sign and you compare it to your speed. And at that moment, you're deferring to that authority, telling you whether you got to either speed up or you got to slow the fuck down because you're going way too fast. But that sign is telling you the safe traveling speed. And now, if you were in a snowstorm, you'd completely disregard that sign. You would say that's unrealistic because that's for clear roads and sunny days and, But if you're in a snowstorm, you're going to be going a lot slower, but by your own authority, your own sovereignty, you're going to be sovereign in your speed. And I guess that's why it's a limit, not a minimum. But when it's a nice day, sunny, there's no other cars on the road, are you going 55 miles an hour? Well, only if you're an NPC. But I think the answer is no there. And you're only sovereign in your authority to go that speed as long as what? What outside of you have you checked the boxes and lined up the okay for yourself to give yourself the authority to go faster? Just different scenarios of authority and sovereignty. You don't know your own sovereignty, that you seek your authority, the authority to do anything, you derive it from them. And that way they have full control over you. Someone who is sovereign has full control over themselves. full control over their emotions and how other things make them feel. Nothing makes you feel anything. You make you feel. The other things are just the stimulation for that feeling. So, I know that this is an odd place to end it, but this video is getting long. And so I'm going to cut it off there. And thank you for joining me. Please like and subscribe. Never stop spreading your light. I love you.